Hello, and welcome to the Producers Guild conversation with the creative team behind Raya and the Last Dragon. We'd like to thank our friends at Walt Disney Animation Studios and Angelotti PR for making this event possible. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator today, Scott Mantz. Scott is a longtime member of the Producers Guild, and he is the recipient of the Press Award honoring outstanding entertainment journalism from the ICG Publicists Guild. From 2000 to 2018, Scott was a producer for Access Hollywood. Currently, Scott is the contributing film critic for KTLA TV, and he is the host of For Your Consideration and You Know That Scene. Welcome, Scott. Welcome, panelists. Thank you all for being here. And please, Scott, take it away.
Thank you so much for that very kind introduction. I gotta say, I sure do love Raya and the Last Dragon. I've now seen this movie 3 times, and I cannot wait to see it a 4th on the big screen. I'm very excited to moderate today's Producers Guild conversation with producer Osnat Shurer, screenwriter Adele Lim, and director Carlos López Estrada. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Well, the play's the thing. So Adele, please tell us how you got started on this. What was your inspiration, and how much of your own personal heritage did you put into this story?
Wow. Well, I have to thank Osnat for pulling me in to this. And in the beginning, there were already these beautiful visuals and a beautiful world, this a strong female warrior and a dragon. And I knew I was in. I was obsessed with dragons. Having grown up in Southeast Asia, I grew up on so much, Hong Kong Kung Fu female heroines who could just kick ass. And, and the dragon has a very special place in our hearts, particularly the Southeast Asian water dragon. Coming up with the story, it was very personal for all of us, wanting to tell a story about, a broken world and how you can bring a broken world back together. And one of the best things about the whole process truly was, Osnat really managed to put together this fantastic cultural group, to help, educate the Disney team, but also within the Disney team, Osnat was just such a proponent for, female representation. And also there were so many people who came from the region or, came from that cultural heritage. So we could, for the first time in our careers, for most of us, we're able to put all of that, how we grew up, all the stories our mothers and grandmothers told us, on the page, on the boards. And that really was a first.
Wow, really, really wonderful. And Osnat, tell us how far back this goes for you. How did this project come about, and what made these screenwriters perfect for you to flesh out the story?
Oh, it starts, well, I have to start back on Moana, which is the film I worked on before Raya, and that where we carefully put together a trust of what we called our Oceanic Story Trust of various experts in various areas, whether they're archaeologists, anthropologists, or master tattoo artists, to help inform the film, but from the beginning through the end. We went and in Samoa and Tahiti and different places did table reads and got notes, and each design was checked. And that was for us such an incredible collaboration and such an opportunity that I carried that forward into Raya. And so right at the very beginning of Raya and the Last Dragon, we put together our Southeast Asia Story Trust. But then also, it's what they say, nothing about us without us, I think is the sentence, to make sure that there are people at the creative table who have that lived visceral experience that's inspiring the film. We're a completely fantasy world, but it's inspired so deeply by the cultures of Southeast Asia, by the commonalities between them. So as more than luck, a lot of intention and a lot of great good fortune would have it, we had Adele, her co-screenwriter, Quy Nguyen, whose heritage is Vietnamese, our head of story, Phan Vera Sunthorn, who grew up in Thailand, and on it went. So that throughout the production, there were people who brought that to the table. So we hired them as screenwriters because they're awesome and great. The kind of personal experience they brought to the table, either Adele by being a badass woman writing about other badass women, and or Quy and everything he brought to the table. I mean, imagine finding out that one of your screenwriters also happens to be a martial arts choreographer with an expertise in Southeast Asian martial arts, right? So I think this was kind of a producer's dream.
Oh my goodness. I'll get to that in a second. My goodness. Carla, so where was this project at when you and Don Hall came on to direct?
Well, the process of making an animated movie at Disney is very particular, and as you probably know, it's also very long. So I think from beginning to end, probably the people who were working on Raya from day one until we released it were probably on it close to 6 years. So you can just imagine like how much a story evolves and how much it really, like, every single person who come in contact with it really helped shape it. Don and I joined Osnat and Adele about 1.5 years ago, in its like last year of production. It was Don Kui and myself, and it was really incredible because we really got to step into this world that had been created both like on screen and also off screen, just because the team was built. The team had been working on this story for a long time. They had gone to travel to Southeast Asia, done all these research trips. The Southeast Asian Story Trust existed, and also the world of the movie, like the characters were there. Adele had been working on them for a while. The story as a whole was already there, and we just got to sort of like join the team and then get to create together, which was a total joy. But it was essentially a 1.5 years ago until now.
So I'm hearing during this conversation that the genesis of the story goes back quite a few years, around 6 years. So just over the last few months, since I've seen the film the first time, the second time, and the third time, it has resonated with me in completely different ways in just the couple of months that I've gotten to see it a couple times. So my question is, especially starting with you, Adele, here, is that, like, how crazy is it that the story has resonated so strongly, especially over the last year and especially over these last couple of months?
I think, Scott, no one is more surprised than we were, and perhaps even a little alarmed when we came up with the beginning of the story. Even though Kumandra is this fantasy land, we wanted very much the obstacles and conflicts of the land to be reflected in the real world. And at that point, about 3-4 years ago, any child could tell you looking around that the world felt very divided. And, most of us are parents in the room. That's not the world we want our children to grow up in. And so we set out to tell a story about that. And then we talked about, what we wanted Raya and the world to face, the Droon, an obstacle that, a formidable force that could take away everything nearest and dearest to all of us, our loved ones, our homes, our communities. But to tell a story where if people could find a way to come together, everything that was taken from us would be given back, and the world that was broken could be restored to something even more beautiful, even more hopeful, because that's what we want to believe. And that's what, I want to believe for our world right now. And so as an outgrowth of that, we had the Droon turning people to stone and, bringing people back. At that point, no one had heard of the word COVID. And so, when that started to come out, I remember, all of us being on these calls and meetings thinking, oh, wow, is this a little too close to home? Because when we talked about the Droon, we talked about it in terms of being a virus even. And, and I think more lately in the last couple of months, it's heartbreaking to see, the violence, towards the AAPI community, and we're in May, the Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. And that's also, I think because of what you said and how you felt it, it's because of all those divisions in that world. And that's the natural outgrowth of a divided world. So hopefully people will be able to take from the movie, of that promise of what we can be. And, I think that's all of our hopes for what people take away from the movie.
My goodness, absolutely. Osnat, when you were over the course of these years, as you were working on the film, and I guess you could say current events caught up with the movie, like what producing concerns did you have with, like Adele said, maybe this hits too close to home, or did you just kind of use that as a chance to really address it in a way that it would appeal to people of all ages?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I don't think people realize how personal our films are. You know, you think Disney and you think big company, and it's really a bunch of us sitting in a room and talking about what's important to us and what's hurting our hearts about the world today, and what is the one thing you would want to examine. And so for us, all along, it was a question of looking at the divisive world around us, and if we could just find a way to come together for the common good, for the greater good. And Carlos was being a little humble earlier when he talked about it all existing. The story was there, but one of the wonderful things that Carlos and Don were able to bring to it is take a look at it and go, you know what, let's get more specific. Yeah, we all want to come together, right? But what does it take? What does it mean? And we honed in together through a lot of soul searching, all of us together, to the idea of trust, that that honestly, it takes a lot of courage to trust enough and take that first step. And it's the courage to be vulnerable, even when it didn't work, because you have to try again, and you have to try again, and you have to try again. And so if there is, we never for a moment, when we say too close to home, that's a good thing. We want to, we're reflecting what's going on in our world. We're reflecting what's going on in our lives and in the lives of our audience, because we are our audience. And so the things that make us laugh stay in the film because they're going to make everyone laugh. And the things that touch real close to home. All of us had this problem where we were listening, we're watching the film for like a sound mix or something, and just get so emotionally caught up, especially in that third act, that we go, wait, I forgot to give notes. Can we rewind? So if it touches our hearts, we are the audience.
I gotta say, that's a good problem to have, that you're so into the film that you're working on that you forget to do.
Right.
Well, yeah, I've got a job to do here.
I know, you're like, no, I wasn't crying.
Yeah, Carlos, in addition to just the timeliness and just the depth of the story and the arcs of these characters, you have this challenge of making a film for the whole family, a film that will resonate for kids, a film that will resonate for grown-ups, a film that has depth, a film that has levity and humor and heart. How did you maintain that tonal balance from start to finish? What were the challenges there?
Well, I think it's two main components. The first one is that as a creative team, we all wanted to make sure that everything we put onto the story was grounded in truth. And whether it was the action, whether it was the drama, where it was the comedy, nothing was there just for the sake of making the movie, more exciting or more dramatic or more funny. It really came from a place of like, we have a theme, we have an idea that we're trying to explore, and characters that need to learn how to trust each other in a world that is as fractured as a world could be. And everything was in service of that. That is like the slightly more like philosophical answer. And the more practical answer is that we screen the movie a lot for ourselves, for the other directors and writers in Disney animation. And then as we get closer and closer to finishing it, we start opening it up to more and more people, to everyone in the studio. So all 900 plus people in the studio get to see it and have a link where they can give thoughts and feedback. Eventually, we start opening up to people outside of the studio, across the street to like Disney, the bigger Disney. Yeah. And then we have the previews. So many people, we really get the way the animation process works at Disney is it's divided into screenings. So you get to screen the movie, you get feedback, then you all come back together and then figure out, rework it, rejigger it, like change some sequencing, add scenes, take away scenes. And you do that often to make sure that essentially exactly what you asked, that the comedy and the drama are balanced, that one isn't detracting from the other, that the movie flows well, that it's clear, and that it's understandable. And if anything isn't, if one person raises a flag and says like, you know what, I don't really get this one particular thing, that will sit the next day, we'll sit in a room for hours and hours and hours until we can come up with so many possibilities of how to make this thing clear. And that's really how the entire movie is made. So it's an iterative process, but it's really, really rewarding. And when it works, like when you finally see that all the math starts to add up, it just feels incredible.
I can't imagine. By the way, I got to say, Carlos, what a luxury to be able to work on an animated movie in that way. You don't get that luxury too much with live action films because it just costs like so much money to go back and do reshoots and so on. So the question I couldn't wait to ask you all about is the casting. What an amazing cast. Kelly Marie Tran, Awkwafina, Osnat, how did this come together?
Oh my, a lot of luck, wonderful casting directors. You know, the first person we actually cast onto the movie was Awkwafina, and we met Awkwafina, just a meet and greet before Crazy Rich Asians came out, before Ocean's 8 came out, and that voice and her personality, and combine that with a sincere love for Disney, as well as for her own cultures that already are mixed in her. It was kind of we came out of that meeting and went, hey, we've just cast Sisu Dragon. And so her presence influenced what the character became. It went on from there, though. I can tell you that casting, all of us can talk to this, but casting Kelly Marie as Raya was so revelatory. There's a combination in Kelly of strength, warmth, appeal. Like, nobody can get mad at Kelly Marie because her love, her love for humanity is right there on her sleeve. And so you bring all this together, it really helped, because we're actually with a character at the beginning of the film who's had a trauma, who's a bit of a loner, who wants to, and yet you bring that Kelly to it, and what you get is this magical thing called the character Raya. So Carlos can talk to like the first time in the booth with Kelly, but is really mind-boggling, and went on from there. Gemma Chan, Sandra Oh, Benedict Wong. I mean, yeah, Daniel Day Kim. What a dream cast.
All right, Carlos, that's your cue.
We talk about often, well, I'll tell you about Kelly first. It's just that first session that we had, I think, was like really, it was like a spiritual experience. Just because we had been working on this character for, months at that point. And all of a sudden she steps into the booth and she breathes live into it. And there's this one particular scene that she got to improvise, the scene where she, before Sisu comes back and they both get to meet, Raya makes an offering towards Sisu and sings a song and says a prayer. And a lot of that was scripted, but Kelly suggested that we tried an ad-libbed version and improvised the prayer, sort of like she said, look, if I'm older, I question some of the things that I grew up believing in. I'm a little bit more of like skeptical and cynical about things, so I'd probably approach it from that place. Do you mind if I try it? And she did it, and it just all of a sudden clicked in like a really beautiful, profound way. And from there on, it is just Kelly building the character with us, which was so exciting. But what I was going to say before, sorry, is that like Kelly, every single one of the actors who joined the cast found that spiritual connection with the movie and with the roles. And it was over and over again that we'd be having these sessions just talking about the scenes and discussing like specific things about the movie. And they would just open up about what it means for them to embody this character, what this movie means to them now, what the world of Raya, why it's so important to be sharing these messages. And really towards the end of the movie, it just became like this really big family. We all get mushy at the end of every recording session because we'd all be like just so high on this idea of like we're doing something meaningful that we really believe in. And it was just such a beautiful experience.
So Adele, when casting came together, how did the screenplay further evolve after the casting?
Oh, that's great. So this was my first animated feature. And one of the few places you get that spontaneity and that life is in the recording studio with our talent, because it all exists intellectually, it exists in boards and on the script, but it's not until that actor comes in and kind of breathes life and anima into that character that it really, truly comes to life. And Carlos and Osnat talked about, the respect and the message of the movie, but what these actors also brought was joy. Whether it's in how Awkwafina laughs and that cackle and knowing, we want our dragon to sound like that and give you, because we would be rolling on the floor when Awkwafina would go on a roll. And even with Kelly Marie Tran, that was that wonderful, vulnerable and sensitivity, but also, she's great at improv and can, she can crack a joke, and there was that extra life into it. And so Kui and I would listen, often we'd be in the booth reading across from the actors, which is another thing writers don't often get to do, so bonus. And, get so inspired by, the jokes and the fun that, we want to, take part of it and just, redo the script for the next screening or the next take to make sure that really magic spark would still be in that character. So whatever we could take from them, we absolutely did.
Now, Carlos, did you have your actors together, or was everybody on their own when it came to doing their voiceovers?
Well, you know what? I don't think any two actors were in the same room at the same time, which just speaks to their tremendous acting ability. Not only that, but then, as you're very aware, early last year, we all had to go home for a very long period of time, and we had to keep working, and they all had to keep recording from their homes. So most of the dialogue that you hear in the movie was recorded in their closets. We shipped them. Well, by we, I mean I was not on her team, because I don't even know how they figured all these logistics, but they shipped them computers, microphones, cables, stands, iPads. In the case of Awkwafina, she was sent a tent so that she could build this sort of like soundproof tent in her living room. And then, no one was allowed to come in contact with the actors. So essentially through Zoom, they would be setting everything up. They would be their own engineers. So they would have the programs. They would have to be like clicking in and out of their takes, sending all the files, making sure that the levels were right. So it was not only the fact that they weren't together, it was the fact that we were all trying to figure out how work from home functioned. And we also had to make the movie and ask them to have these like incredible performances from their closets.
Osnat, one of my questions that I had prepared, like what were some of the unique producing challenges that you had compared to Moana? And from what I'm hearing, you had the mother load.
Yes, honestly, March a year and some ago, we get the call that we're going home. We're like, it's probably 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Oh my goodness, how am I going to manage this in my schedule? Oh, poor me. A year later, we're still at home. So we finished the film from over 400 individual homes. And if you would have asked me before this happened, if we can do this, I would have told you absolutely no, you're nuts. We can't do that. We're dependent on being in the room together, the synergy of the creative work with us and the board and the story room. And how could you do that? And technology was solved relatively quickly because we have such amazing technologists at the studio. And some of the social issues we had to solve, it took us a while to find a different kind of. It requires intimacy and trust to sit in a room and talk about issues, in your own life in order to find the truth in the film. And we had to create it differently in this format, in these little boxes. But instead you find kids and dogs and cats and people are at the door and somebody's Wi-Fi goes down. And so there was a whole different way of finding that relationship. I think some of the things that we found that were very interesting to me, one was that there's only so much time you can do this and really have your brain not turn to mush, right? Mm-hmm. So we were quite disciplined about hours and finished relatively early. I mean, I have not yet worked on a film that in the last year of production, the directors and I are having lunch with the family, with that in the evenings. That said, that meant that particularly the directors and I and the writers and the heads of departments had to delegate a lot more. And in order to do that, we had to hone our skills of briefing, knowing exactly what you want emotionally so that artists can do what they do. And the exciting thing from all of that is that people loved it. They had a great experience. They felt empowered, trusted. There you go, life and art imitating each other. They felt seen. The directors were delighted every time. Like when we finally went in and saw things on the big screen, we thought we'd freak out on all the stuff we didn't see on our little iPads. instead we freaked out and enjoy, oh, I didn't see that, that's gorgeous. And that's a big tribute both to my production management team, honestly, because the details are insane, and to our artists, because if you trust them and they're already their A game, you're getting the A++ game. So there's some things we all want to carry forward, but we can't wait to be together again.
I got to say, for you to go through that whole filmmaking process in such an unprecedented way, and the movie turns out to be as wonderful as it is, hats off to each and every person in front of and behind the camera. Wonderful, wonderful. Adele, I want to ask about the 5 worlds of Kumandra here. Like when you were fleshing it out, when you were discovering what those worlds were going to be, how did you describe them on the page?
Oh, that was really a big process of collaboration, with all the wonderful visual development, and particularly the cultural trust that Osnat had put together. Because, I grew up in Malaysia, and in one country, you have so many different races, religions, traditions, histories. How do you really sort of encapsulate like the essence of an entire region when even one country is so diverse? And so, what Osnat did, with all these cultural experts, was to expose the team and us. Like, again, Kui and I, were of the culture, and even my mind was blown in terms of, what I learned about the region, things that I thought were specific to, Malaysia. Really, there were these lines, these threads of commonality that we all had. And so, the task was then to really dig deep and find what was that the largest thread that ran through all our communities. And it came to, and the answer was community. And we felt it, we felt it in our hearts, how we were all raised, that it's not just about you and it's not just about your family, it's about your neighbor, it's about, the people around you. And we felt like that was also reflected in the story we wanted to tell, that Raya, starts off as this lone, almost like Western rider. And by the end of it, she's not the sole conquering hero who has to defeat and tear her enemy down. She's the person who has to pull her enemy in. And it turned the story about power on its head, that it's not about vanquishing somebody else so my power increases. It's about getting power through pulling you in. And that felt like a new, very authentic way of telling a Southeast Asian inspired story. And again, with all the beautiful details in it and all the stories that came from it and all the richness that we don't even really talk about in the movie, but you see it. For people who know nothing about the Southeast Asian region, hopefully, you'll be drawn into it and, want to see the world that inspired Kumandra. But for the people who came from the culture and grew up there, the number of emails and texts and like delighted voicemails I got of like, we saw mangosteens and longans and batik and the Chris, her sword, and knowing that these are things that, we held so dear to our hearts, but now, Disney's given us this platform to share it with the rest of the world. It was just tremendous. I don't think, we could really put into words like the effect it had on us.
Wow, amazing. Carlos, I would love to get your take on working with the production design on the look of the 5 worlds of Kumandra.
The whole art team is just making miracles every single day, because it's an animated movie. So in contrast to sort of like what I have been used to, you sort of like shoot in this world and there's already, existing ground planes and trees and buildings. Nothing is made for these animated movies when you first start. So every single element that you see on the screen needs to be like carefully designed, thought of. You have to think about the textures and the colors and the way that light is going to reflect on them and the characters and absolutely every single element. So here's this team that, I mean, many of them were involved in the movie from the very, very beginning, got to go on all these research trips, got to like really interact with everyone, the Southeast Asian Story Trust. So like every design that they were doing, every texture they were doing, whenever they were doing sort of like a textile or piece of fabric, and it had sort of like a pattern, like all of these would go through this like cultural workflow that Osnat had established. and then it would come to us and we would have meetings about like, well, let's see an option in a different color, let's see it bigger, smaller, can we reimagine it, can we get a few iterations of this, and it just becomes sort of like the greatest art project where you're working with these incredibly talented people who are all thinking about the story and reacting to it, and I think that's the most important part, is that they're really collaborators. Like, no one's ever going to come with like out of left field ideas that are not grounded in something. Like, they come to you and they've done the research and they can back it up. They say like, look, here's my design, and let me show you these pages and pages of research that I did, talking about the architecture and like the aesthetics and why in our story it's relevant. And it's really just such a treat to have like that level of intense artistic collaboration from beginning to end.
If
And
I
on
may
top of
add, I
everything-
just want to add one little thing that to build on what both of them have said, in that as we thought about each of the lands, our artists went off of descriptions of what is the personality of that land, of the people there. What do they feel? How close are they to what was in our minds? Because you always build a history to a fantasy, right? A fantasy world. So in our minds, the culture started here and moved here. So these folks are the most connected to the dragon. So their shapes are circle and the feeling of a drop in water. You look at that through the lens of the underlying principles that they talked about of Southeast Asian design. And then, but let's say now it's in the mountains, in the snow, which you don't have in Southeast Asia. How would you apply that to that world? So we think of it as a real world. We think about what you eat in it, what colors you would wear, because, hey, you're a merchant. You want people to look at you. You'd be brighter colors. All of that is part of the thinking. It's this kind of, we're real geeks, basically.
Well, it certainly is a real world, the way it certainly felt so lived in. And I also wanted to, so on top of the icing on the cake of this whole film is you have a beautiful score by James Newton Howard. My goodness, I mean, all the scores he's composed over the years, I've never heard a score like this. So I would love to hear about maybe the conversations that you had with him, especially when it came to some of the Southeastern Asian instruments that were used in it. Osnat, you go first.
Okay. Well, first of all, James Newton Howard. I mean, like, whose like list of the composer I'd most want to make my film sound epic and emotional and fun and like deep. It was a dream. It was completely a dream come true for us, because that his ability to create themes for characters and just to, he's mind-bogglingly good. And then what we did is we spent a little bit of time working with one of our ethnomusicologists and identifying some of the instruments specific to the region. And there's also musical influences in the region, whether Indian or Chinese, that came in. So to identify what are the things that feel uniquely Southeast Asian, rather than what we're more used to hearing, which tends to be East Asian, Chinese and Japanese. And within that, for him to pull that and find its both understanding its spiritual meaning. There are specific gamelan instruments that have a very unique spiritual connotation, so we use them in that context. And underneath that, keep those melodies that make your heart soar. So it was totally miraculous. I don't know. We would listen to stuff, right? Carlos would listen and we'd go, wow. We'd go, are there notes? Wow. Wait a minute. Let this sink in for a minute, because it's gorgeous.
Wow. And also you have this beautiful original song, Lead the Way. Carlos, talk about that.
I think it was just a dream, because I think just traditionally the credit song is sort of like maybe one of the last pieces that come into the movie, because it's like once you have the thing, you can start sort of like understanding exactly how it'll flow and what kind of note you want to leave people with. That's like it puts the cap on the whole thing. And we knew that because we had been pushing so much to honor sort of like the traditions that we were being inspired by, but also wanted to like bring Raya to a contemporary conversation and make it feel very much like of the time. And we were presented with this idea of collaborating with Janae Aiko for this. who just could not have been more perfect to be the closing voice to the movie. And I remember we had one remote session with her where we essentially just talked about the movie in very, very broad scope, like told her about the themes, told her about what was important to us. Then she got to ask like some very beautiful, poetic, abstract questions. She was like, well, what color do you think the film is? And what element do you think? And we talked about water and the importance of water throughout the movie and the symbology of it. And then she sort of like just disappeared. She watched the movie once, I think, and then came back with this really beautiful, just this really beautiful end note that encompasses like everything that the movie's about: the trust, the hope, the joy, and it does all of it in like a very accessible, unique way. So anyway, it's I think it was just such a joy after we had finished the movie, after we had been so happy to say, oh, and now we have this other extra little piece that we're going to be able to like really, really just close our statement with.
Adele, let's close our conversation with the takeaway that you hope people have brought with them after Raya and the Last Dragon.
Oh, it ends, as Carlos said, it ends so beautifully in this world that started out, as being so broken and divided. And it is restored to this gorgeous land, even more beautiful than what Raya hoped it could be. And I hope people take that away, and that's a promise that exists in our movie. And I hope it's a promise that exists for our world too.
And for you, Osnat, your takeaway?
For me, the takeaway that I hope people come away with is that it's really worth it for the greater good of our planet at this time. If we can just have enough courage to reach out to each other and work together, we can turn this around. And that's, to me, exciting. And it's if everyone comes away with that, if half the people come away with that, I'm really, really happy.
Well, I got to say, I came away from this conversation even more pumped to see Raya and the Last Dragon for a fourth time on the big screen. And now that things are getting better and better, I'm definitely going to do that. Osnat, Adele, Carlos, thank you so much for this wonderful Producers Guild conversation for Raya and the Last Dragon. Best of luck to all of you, and please continue to be safe.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.